Long before clocks, watches,
or calendars existed,
ancient humans discovered something they could always rely on: the sun.
every single morning, the sun rose from nearly the same direction.
Every evening, it disappeared beyond the horizon. Day after day, year after year, this pattern never seemed to fail.
At first, it was simply another part of nature.
But over time, humans noticed something extraordinary.
As the sun moved across the sky, their shadows moved too. In the early morning, shadows stretched long across the ground. As the sun climbed higher, the shadows became shorter.
Around the middle of the day, they were at their shortest.
Then, as the sun began to set, the shadows grew long once again.
This wasn't just interesting, it was useful. Hunters learned that the position of the sun told them how much daylight remained.
Families knew when it was time to gather food, return to camp, or prepare for the cold night ahead. Eventually, someone placed a straight wooden stick into the ground.
By watching its shadow move throughout the day, they could estimate the passing of time more accurately. Without realizing it, ancient humans had created the first sundial. Nature had become humanity's very first clock. The sun helped ancient humans measure a single day.
But a much bigger question remained. How do you measure many days? The answer appeared every night.
The moon. Unlike the sun, the moon never looked exactly the same.
Some nights it was a thin crescent. Other nights it became brighter and larger until it lit
up the entire landscape as a full moon.
Then, night after night, it slowly disappeared again.
Ancient humans realized this wasn't random. The moon followed the same cycle over and over.
From one full moon to the next took about 29.5 days.
Without knowing the science behind it,
they had discovered the world's first natural month. Soon, people began counting time by the moon's changing shape, instead of trying to count every single day.
Hunters remembered how many moons had passed since the last migration.
Families knew when certain fruits would ripen after a few moon cycles. Communities even planned gatherings and
ceremonies around the full moon,
because its bright light made traveling
at night much safer. Long before calendars were written on paper,
the moon had already become humanity's first monthly calendar.
The sun measured the day, the moon measured the month, but there was still one final mystery.
How could ancient humans tell when an entire year had passed?
The answer appeared after sunset. The stars.
At first, the night sky looked random.
Thousands of tiny lights scattered across the darkness. But after watching the sky for many years, ancient humans noticed something incredible. Certain groups of stars always appeared during the same season. Some stars returned just before summer. Others appeared as winter approached. These patterns repeated year after year without fail.
Soon, people realized the stars could
predict the changing seasons before they even arrived. If a familiar group of stars appeared on the horizon before sunrise, they knew warmer days were coming.
If another constellation returned, they knew colder weather wasn't far away.
This knowledge helped them prepare long before nature began to change. They gathered extra food,
prepared shelters, made warmer clothing, and planned long journeys.
The stars weren't just beautiful to look at.
They became one of humanity's first yearly calendars.
Long before anyone printed a calendar on paper, the night sky was already keeping track of the years. The sun told ancient humans the time of day. The moon helped them measure months. The stars revealed the passing years. But survival depended on something even more important: knowing what the weather would do next.
There were no weather forecasts,
no satellites, no weather apps. Instead, ancient humans watched nature itself. They noticed that birds often flew differently before heavy rain.
Dark clouds gathering over distant mountains usually meant a storm was on the way. Strong winds, changing temperatures,
and even the smell of the air warned them that the weather was about to change. As the seasons changed, trees began growing new leaves or dropping old ones. Flowers bloomed. Rivers rose after heavy rains and shrank during dry seasons.
Animals migrated, hibernated, or returned at almost the same time every year. These weren't random events. They were nature's signals. By carefully observing these patterns over many generations,
ancient humans learned when to prepare for cold winters, gather food before dry seasons,
and move their camps before dangerous weather arrived.
Nature became their teacher, and every day it gave them another lesson about survival. By now, ancient humans had solved one of history's greatest challenges. The sun measured the day, the moon measured the month, the stars marked the passing of the year, and nature warned them when the seasons were about to change. For thousands of years, this knowledge was passed from one generation to the next.
Then, as humans began farming instead of constantly moving from place to place, keeping track of time became even more important.
Plant crops too early.
They could die from the cold. Plant them too late. There might not be enough time to harvest before winter. So people began creating simple calendars. Some carved marks into bones. Others scratched lines onto stones or pieces of wood. Later,
Great civilizations built massive monuments that lined up perfectly with the rising sun on special days of the year. Over time, calendars became more accurate.
months received names.
Years were counted.
Eventually, clocks, watches, and the calendars we use today were invented. But every time you check the time or look at today's date,
Remember this. The very first clock wasn't made of gears. The very first calendar wasn't printed on paper. It was the sky above our heads.
and the natural world all around us.